Hi guys, Piggy here, making a video just to point out how busted and how underrated this new unique ring is. So it's about Impale. If you don't know what Impale does, so when an hit impales, which you need to invest into the Impale chance. So when it impales, its hit damage will be recorded and it will last for 5 hits, so which means that for the following 5 hits, each hit will trigger 10% of that recorded damage. So let's say the initial impaled hit deals 100 damage, and then for the following 5 hits, each hit will trigger additional 10 damage. So now let's look back at what this ring does. The last line said up to 60% chance on melee hit for the strongest impale on target to last for 1 additional hit. So with 2 of them, we can easily get 100% chance. But the thing is, what it means. You might think that this ring will just make that initial impale hit to last 6 times instead of 5. The answer is yes and no. So it is not that simple. So what it really does is, let's say you landed an initial impaled hit, which is a Giga hit, and then you melee hit it, which will consume 1 hit to trigger that 10% of the damage, recorded damage, but at the same time, it will also make that initial impale hit to last 1 additional hit. So which means that it consumed 1 hit, but it added another 1 hit, so it's not changing the hits it can last. So it means that it can infinitely keep triggering that initial Giga hit. The only limit is the duration of the impale, because it can expire in 8 seconds by default, and from the 2 rings it will reduce 50% impale duration, so which will make that 8 seconds to 4 seconds. But that should be fine. 4 seconds, I believe if you abuse it, it will be just enough to kill any Ubers in the game. But if you're not comfortable, you can always have this anointment which said 50% increased impale duration. So 50% reduced from the rings and increase from the anointment, so it's not changing anything, so it will still be 8 seconds. Yeah, so let's first prove what I just said about this mechanic before we talking about how we can abuse them. Okay, so first I want to say that I have 2 skills, perforate and cyclone. They're the same purpose, just to trigger the hits, but I converted all of the Phys to LE by the glove and Phys to lightning, and then I support it with void manipulation so that it cannot deal elemental damage. So which means that these 2 skills are actually not dealing any damage to the enemy. Yeah, and we have another set is the Blade 4 of Impaling, which said that critical hits will always impale, and we use Spell Echo and Plume of Pursuit, so which will make the repeated always crit, so it will always impale. Okay, so normally if we impale with this Blade Fall, it will only last for 5 hits, but with these 2 rings, let's see how many hits it can last. So no damage here, then impale, and keep attacking. Yeah, and then 8 seconds expired and we stopped triggering the impale. Yeah, so let's now use a more busted skill, perforate. So it's not doing any damage and impales, and you can see how many damage it can trigger from that impale. Okay, now that we proved how it actually works, and now how can we make use of it? So first of all, we will have to land and Giga hit damage. So there are different ways to do this. So the most common way is just to use a slammer, right? A big 2-handed weapon, Warcries, and a slam, and supported with Feast of War to deal double damage, and probably also Ruthless, so which the third hit will deal also around double damage, and Warcry to have double damage, and the Echoes of Creation to have 75% more damage. And also you can probably use Phys run, so which can also give you 30% damage on that one hit. There are some other ideas. So one is the Legacy of the Rose, and this Shaper Slam, it has around 4k% damage effectiveness, so you can also make use of this. And also the Retaliation Scale, Crushing Fist, it has 2k% damage effectiveness. Yeah, so there are many ways to land that initial Giga hit damage. And then how do we trigger them? As I already showed, the Cyclone is a very decent skill. It has 300% of the base attack speed. You can also use this variant. When you channel to more stages, it will deal even more attack speed. Right. So yeah, so Cyclone is definitely a very decent skill to trigger, but this is the best single target trigger skill, I believe. So when you change the stance recently, you will create 10 additional spikes, plus 5 by default, it will be 15 spikes. Let's assume 80% of them will hit, so it will be 12 hits per attack. And then you can support with multi-strike, momentum, or attack speed. So it just can trigger insane amount of hits in a short time. To push it further, at the same time, you can check the melee and duration tag, and there are some skills that you can just throw it, and you don't need to keep casting it, and you can just keep using the perforate. So for example, you can use Rage Vortex or Vortex of Berserking, or like 4 Blaze Storms, or some Fall skills. You throw it and then you keep using perforate. Yeah, so with these all combined, it can trigger so many hits from that very initial Giga hit impulse. To scale it further, you can also invest into the impel effect. So by default, each hit will only trigger 10% of that initial hit, but if you invest into the effect, let's say you have 100% increased effect, so instead of 10%, it will be 20% of that initial hit damage, so which will also boost the DPS dramatically. If you really want to abuse the hell out of it and be unethical, you can use weapon swap. You can use a two-handed big slow weapon to land that initial hit, then you swap to a dual wield. And with 2 weapons with very high base attack speed, it can be as high as like 2.5 or even higher. With that setup, I just cannot imagine how easily it can one-shot any overboss. I also want to just mention that this setup looks really potential for bossing, right? I also want to point out it should also be good for mapping. The reason is because, so what we scale, we want to scale the impel effect, also the Phys damage, maybe crit and attack speed. So all of them will benefit our triggering scale. So which means that in normal mapping, we just use the cyclone, right? Use the cyclone and it can kill most the white mobs and blue mobs and some rare mobs. And for some hard monsters, you just slam once and you keep cyclone to trigger that impel. So I can just imagine the mapping should be also fast and smooth. So yeah, just to throw out this idea, I'm not sure if I want to go ahead and make a build for it, but I would also like to see builds made by other creators or players. So let me know in the comment if you have more ideas to push this idea further. So yeah, see you next time.